Welcome to Maine, we're stretched to the bone. Prices keep rising, the paycheck stays prone. Inflation keeps knocking, won't leave us alone. They're selling the lie, groceries climbing, the gas tank is low. The bill's hitting harder than snow, but silence still blankets the truth. Where does it go? They're selling the lie. Housing is gridlocked from Portland to the county. Workers commute far past what feels soundly. Talk of solution comes yearly, not loudly. They're selling the lie.
Welcome to the Muddy Waters Podcast, where Mainers tell their stories, unfiltered.
Good morning, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, and you are watching the Muddy Waters Podcast yet again. We are back. I think we were off last week, not intentionally. We just didn't have the right people to bring in, but we are back. We exist here to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on in our state and our world. Again, primarily focused on things going on right here in the state of Maine. And we do that in order to counter the narrative of the Democrat Party, because unfortunately the mainstream media has become a propaganda arm of the Democrat Party. And so we have to counter that with bringing in people and telling real stories about what's going on, bringing in real experts, unlike some of the quote unquote experts that are used by the other side to talk about what's really happening, and just people in the know. And so we're fortunate to have with us today, once again, Nick Murray of Lead Maine. Thank you for joining us, Nick.
Thanks for having me on, Chuck. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's always a good time, even when we disagree, which we do sometimes. I think the last time we had you on wasn't representing any organization, but your own thought, talking about tariffs and stuff like that. But before that, we've talked about Yes Every Kid, and we know you used to work for Maine Policy years ago. I think that's when we first met, when you were giving a presentation at the Cumberland County Republicans about the gross increase in taxation here in the state of Maine, which has continued to charge forward even faster than before. Anyway, so always a good time to have you on. Really appreciate the work that you do here in Maine. And yeah, just today we got a really fun topic, but just tell us what you're doing now with Lead. I think most people probably know what Lead Maine is, but feel free to talk about that too. And just, what your role is there now before we get into the really fun, anti-privacy thing that's happening here in this in America and in Maine with flock cameras. But yeah.
Yeah, the flock story is a fun one. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Lead Maine is a relatively new organization. Representative Laurel Libby of Auburn founded it early this year, late last year. And what we're doing is educating, empowering, and engaging Mainers to build a future that is freer, that's more prosperous, and that's something that we can all hope for. We all hope for in Maine, for a place where folks can grow, they can come and build a family, a business, start that business, build that home, and just be a place where people want to come. And we know that Maine is such a beautiful place. We have such amazing natural resources, human resources, and so we want to see a policy environment that actually cultivates that and moves towards economic growth and moves towards free markets. I mean, that's the way to get prosperity in our state. We see it next door with New Hampshire, so we draw a lot of comparisons to New Hampshire. A lot. It's a really great natural experiment, I think, but we love Maine. We want to make sure Maine has a good future and a prosperous future. And I think that, it's needed now more than ever. It's this is a really important year. And like we say at Lead Maine, we're at a long-term arc. We're not working year to year. We're not working election cycle to election cycle. We're working for several years out, and our goal is by 2030 to have a full, conservative majority with a governor that's aligned, a policy agenda that's ready to go, and so that's to me that's the timeline that I'm looking to. I have a 15-month-old son, and that's the time he's going to be starting kindergarten or school or whatever. And so, I think the next 5 years are a critical time in Maine. And that's why Lead Maine exists, to make sure that folks understand the issues. They understand how easy it is to get involved, and to speak up and know how powerful your voice is, and to engage with the process. And ultimately we want folks to, be active in their community, at the state level, speaking their mind, speaking up for conservative values, for free market principles, for liberty. And so we hope to engage and empower folks in Maine to do that. That's our main goal.
Well, I think it's really awesome. One of the things that I've noticed about not primarily the conservative movement or the Republican movement, whatever you want to call it, Republicans, conservatives, whatever, is that they tend to have a short-term approach. Everything's about the next election, right? There's no long-term plan. Whereas the other side, the Democrats, at the very least, it looks like, I don't think they're stumbling and bumbling about, and they've just done this over the course of the last 60 years, but it looks like they've been executing on a strategy for 60 years where everything, even their apparent defeats are all part of their plan, or they rope it into their plan and their strategy and how to turn it and spin it so that they can use it as ammunition for their next race. Whereas our side has largely just been reactive and just trying to figure out, well, how do we win the next election? And so I think it's the work that you guys are doing is so important because we have to have a long-term plan. We have to have a long-term strategy. Because when we I think they say you can shear a sheep many times, but skin it only once. On the Republican side, we get people involved and we use them for everything that they have and make them hope that we're going to win this next election. And then we don't win. We don't win everything, or we don't win, even the House. We make progress, maybe. Like last time, we got as close to owning the House as we have, close to winning the legislature and we have in a number of years. And yet it was this devastating loss. Everybody was super negative about it. And I think that caused a lot of people to be like, man, I'm doing all this work and for what, right? And it's because when you build people up and tell them that you have this short-term strategy and we're going to do it, and then we don't do it, they're not going to stick around. They're not going to keep working because they gave everything. Whereas, we need to have that longer-term focus in order to really seriously, effectively be able to turn things around. Because, as I like to say, the Democrats didn't do this overnight. Falmouth, Yarmouth, Cumberland, Portland, even these places, Cape Elizabeth, Scarborough, they didn't become more liberal leaning overnight. They're not going to change from being that way overnight. And so we need to have the long term focus. I'm obviously here in Cumberland County, so I'm more cognizant of things here, but anywhere in the state, the shift that's been Maine from a purple state to really a light blue state didn't happen overnight, and it's not going to get changed overnight. So really appreciate the work you guys are doing. So
thanks. Yeah, it takes that pipeline. I think that's really what we're trying to do is build that bench. I mean, it takes who is it? Morton Blackwell, the longtime conservative activist would say that the victory of an election is how many and how active volunteers and activists are. I'm butchering the quote clearly, but it's the winner is decided by who has the most activated folks who are actually working for a candidate. And you're right, you can't rely on a handful of people. There's something to be said where you want something to get done, ask a busy person, but at some point we have to be feeding people into the pipeline, and we have to empower folks to be self-fueling activists in their community and at the state level. And so hopefully we can help to show folks how to speak about issues, hopefully, that's a lot of what I do as the policy and communications director. I'll try to distill issues down, get a one-pager out there on our website, leadmaine.com. And then we also have other one-pagers and resources about how to get involved with the process, how to write a letter to the editor or submit testimony, so you want to lower the barrier of understanding an issue and then lower the barrier of what the process looks like. So people, it doesn't seem like such a large effort to get involved, because it's really not, it does take time. But organizations like Lead Maine can help close those gaps for folks, help folks understand it easy, and then help folks feel confident in speaking up, because that's really what changes this. And you're right. It's not just in an election season. Obviously elections are important, but I would argue even more important is the legislative session and holding lawmakers accountable on the record. All of that stuff is so important for voters to make up their minds in the election. But you have to stay involved in those cold months in the beginning of the year on the odd number of years, it's the most important time where law is being made in Maine, in Augusta. So yeah, that's why it's so critical to keep going through the cycle, and having those things for everyone for folks to be involved along the way.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's really awesome. And like I said, really great and important work. I remember when I first got involved, I had no idea what I was doing, and I had no idea where to go to learn and gather information. I was running for office, right? I didn't have any support locally. And the little support that I got was from an organization that Laurel used to be associated with, the dinner table. And there was a few like house like calls, but like the trainings that were done by the group, the dinner table. And that was helpful, but it was still I was still felt like I was on an island to myself. I had a little bit of training, but there was so much that I didn't know. And I was having to go door to door and basically on my own come up with like what policy ideas I thought would be good. Because again, I didn't have support and I didn't have a resource to go to. And so I think that's great. Like I said, incredible work that you guys are doing. And I know that like some of what you guys have done it has to do with the topic that we're talking about today. But obviously, as conservatives or libertarians or Republicans, however we term ourselves, in this resistance against the radical left movement, we tend to be pretty in favor of freedom and privacy. I still think until they repeal the what's the act that they passed after 9/11, my brain is not working.
Oh, the Patriot Act?
Since they passed the Patriot Act, I think privacy has kind of gone out the window in America. But we want it as much. We want to fight for every bit of it we still have left. So like when I started hearing about these flock cameras, which interestingly enough, I think there's bipartisan support for not having these from the populace. The cameras that like basically gather information on you in the event that they decide that they want to charge you. Again, you'll talk about it a little bit more, but more than that, it seemed like there's some serious security risks for the technology, for the organization that's that is making them, which seems to, again, I've heard, make it easy for them to be open to being hacked and being used for other nefarious purposes. So, so tell us about it, Nick. Because I'm here to get educated too.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on a lot of pieces there. It's a big subject, but yeah, to sort of set the foundation, it's these are automatic license plate reading cameras. So whether it's made by Flock or Motorola or anything else, and that's the core technology, is that this camera is fixed on a light post or fixed somewhere on the road. It scans every license plate that goes by. It's not a traffic camera, it's a license plate reader. So it's constantly tracking and filing the data of every license plate that goes by. But this is the thing, it's not only license plates. It will categorize make and model. It will categorize bumper stickers. It will categorize other features and aspects of the car, of the vehicle, and it won't just do vehicles. It will do bicycles and pedestrians as well. And so it is collecting a lot of data. And like you said, it's storing it in these national databases. And so the part for me, because, I'm pro free markets, I'm pro freedom. Lead Maine wants Maine to grow. We want to be a place for innovation. We want technology to progress, and we want, markets to solve problems for people. But when governments take these sorts of tools and use it in a mass surveillance way, collecting data of literally every person's travel, about their vehicle, you can put together this map of where you've been. That's when it starts to infringe on constitutional rights, especially as a tool for the state. And I think it's a really important, distinction to make, that we want to ban this tool for the state. We don't want to stop the progression of AI technology or electronic technology or anything like that. I think technology is really important. The key here is to keep it out of the hands of the state and to curtail it when the state is using it. And you're right. I think the biggest issue is the fact that Flock itself, when it sells these cameras to local police departments, says, hey, you get access to this database across the country, not only within your state. And here are the other, agencies that we have also contracted with in your state that you'll have access to, but it's also the, tens of thousands of cameras across the country in thousands of cities, and towns. And so, even in their corporate sort of sales pitch to these police departments, they acknowledge that they are using it as a national dragnet, and they're adding this ability to they use this term pattern of life. Essentially, you get a mosaic of where someone has been, and you get to chart their location via their vehicle when they pass through different town lines. And so to me, that's an egregious violation of privacy. It's clearly, if it's not over the line on a Fourth Amendment violation, it allows the state and agents of the state to go right up to the line. And in a similar way, the Patriot Act, dragnet everyone's metadata, everyone's location data, and then have it in this massive database to potentially pull for a crime. That's not how the rule of law works. That's not how the Bill of Rights works. It's not how due process works. You get a warrant for an individualized probable cause. You have suspicion of a crime, and you get a warrant to search someone's effects or papers. And yeah, sure, if you have video of them on a public street camera, then that's admissible. You don't just collect everything, all location information from everyone to maybe use it later on for a crime. That's just not how due process works. So I think it's important to have that principled constitutional stance on this. To me, that's where this really, really hinges.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
that's why so many towns have canceled them. The public backlash has been huge. It's all over the country, not just in Maine.
Yeah, and I hear about it at meetings for the Cumberland County Republicans. I've had a number of people come up and ask me about this and talk about somebody had to leave a meeting to go to a city council meeting in order to be able to talk about them, because it is a gross violation of privacy. And I think one of the questions, and I'll pose this to you, because this is what you tend to get with when these types of things come up, and you're like, you shouldn't be able to have these organizations have access to this. It's like, well, what do you have to hide, Nick?
I have rights. Well, if you want to live in a society like that, you're not living under the Constitution. That's not what American society was built around. If you want to be tracked everywhere you go and that's fine with you, then, you should probably go live in Europe or something. But, to me, that's what makes America uniquely American, is that the rights of the individual supersede any tool that the government can use to potentially, solve a crime. And I don't want to downplay the fact that this has solved crimes. We have found stolen cars and things like that, but it doesn't rationalize having a dragnet a well of people's personal data to go and dip into, whenever you need it. There are plenty of ways for the state to investigate crimes without this, national mass surveillance network.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the bottom line, right? There are other ways for them to be able to do their job. And more importantly, it's almost like guilt until proven innocent. We're going to assume that everybody is guilty and collect information on everybody as though they're guilty. And then only if we, either don't pursue it, looking into them or whatever. But, and I think the other side is like, it's this, 1984, very aggressive 1984 style stuff where it's a police state. It's the government is constantly looking over our shoulder. And like, the issue isn't that I'm not trustworthy. The issue is that the government isn't trustworthy. This is why we created the Constitution the way that we did, is because we know that oppression primarily is led in many places around the world, not exclusively, but by governments. Governments are the most given to oppressing their people of any organization in existence. And so limiting the government from being able to use this, because obviously they present these things and they create these things and they pass these things and sell them as a way to, protect public safety. And if we could trust that our government was actually going to use them for the benefit of all people, and they were going to be perfect. Number one, I think that's what we call idolatry. That government is not God. It is not ultimately good. It is a benign thing that is controlled by people who have their own interests, right? The people who, whether it's a representative republic like we have, or whether it's a monarchy or another form of government, there are people who are running that government who have their own interests at play, and they're not altruistic. Humanity, we are broken. We are not perfect. We're very flawed people. That's part of human nature. And so giving flawed people the ability to have this power over other people is, again, it's why we created the Constitution the way that we did. And so not only is it, under the Constitution, a gross invasion of privacy, it paves the way for an increasing police state where people have to live in fear of the government, not because they're doing anything wrong, but should somebody in government want to do something to them for some reason that benefits somebody else, they have the ammunition to be able to do that, because they can make it look like, or change, or whatever. They can spin a narrative. They can use the tools at their disposal, or they can change laws or even things like that based on that information. Anyway,
you might be surprised, Chuck, but that has happened. Law enforcement have been shown to abuse this tool. I mean, the Institute for Justice, the libertarian public interest law firm, has represented 24 cases in the last 2 years of folks accusing officers of using flock surveillance data or ALPR data to stalk, their romantic interests. So Mother Jones just reported on this like a couple weeks ago. They kind of summarized it all, but yeah, there's been a lot of opportunity for law enforcement to abuse this, and they have. And so you're absolutely right. That's why we have the American system of government, to curtail the state and to prioritize individual rights. And so if we go this way of, it's fine to be living under Big Brother and the watchful eye all the time, what do you have to worry about? You're no longer a free citizen. You've ceded your freedom at that point. You've ceded your autonomy because you're living as a subject of the state under that point. So I think it's really important, especially on issues like this, to draw the line. The Fourth Amendment exists for a reason. The Constitution is a uniquely American thing, and it's for a good reason. And so the Fourth Amendment is a really strong protection against the state's, use of this sort of mass surveillance. So we have to push back. And so that's why I'm thankful for folks like the ACLU of Maine and other progressive organizations that are calling out this same thing. This is a really great issue to show that the right and the left can unite around constitutional rights.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's one of the things sometimes about like government policies and stuff like that. I remember, not on this issue, but talking to my representative who I ran against twice on an issue that was being presented that appeared to me, and I feel confident that it was a violation of freedom of speech. They were trying to limit the speech of certain types of organizations. And my response was like, you shouldn't want this, because yes, you guys are in control right now, but you won't be forever. And this is a dangerous precedent. Like, even if you like see some benefits, like even again, if you're in power now and you're like, oh, I can see how our side can use this to advance our agenda. It's like, yeah, but will your side always be in power? Shouldn't we create rules and have a government that functions not based on who's in power, but based on what's in the best interest of the people, no matter who's in power, right? Like, we shouldn't, just like, I don't think, for instance, right now, there are some people that, because of political expediency, and I don't want you don't have to comment on this necessarily, but like, want to nuke the filibuster, right, in order to pass the SAVE Act, right? And I look at that and I say, the filibuster is there for a really good reason. Now, do I think 100% that we should bring back this talking filibuster and actually require it to be a filibuster? It was intended to be something that would slow things down and make it painful and make people not want to go through a process, or make it painful to stop a process from going through. It wasn't meant to be a trump card that says, nope, you can't advance that bill. And so I do think we need to bring back the talking filibuster, but am I interested in getting rid of the filibuster? No, I think it's really important. Again, it's one of those things that slows down or stops Washington from doing stuff, which I know in today's world, especially where we want to repeal some of the nonsense that the Democrats did nationally. But our government, our founders made it, constituted this, or made our Constitution, created it in such a way to make it harder for government to do things. That's what we want. We want it to be difficult for them to do things. So we don't want to take away roadblocks simply because we're currently in power, because again, we won't always be in power. But anyway,
I mean, and just because it's cross-partisan against flock and for the Fourth Amendment, it's also cross-partisan, for this kind of public safety superseding, that mindset supersedes everything. You see it on the right as well as the left. So I think it really is important to draw that principled constitutional stance, because to me, that's what's really important about this. But you can't discount the fact that the American system of government, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, was set up for a reason. And the reason is to protect individual rights. So we have to be conscientious of that. And it's for a good reason. So, if I'm talking to folks on the left or on the right, I'm trying to make that principled case, because, I think it's important. Benjamin Franklin, for a reason, said, if you will trade liberty for safety, you deserve neither. That's an important thing.
Yeah. So, now, did you get into my brain? So obviously, like, kind of these are the broad strokes. One of the things that's been interesting, and I guess that I'll say, is that, like, people have been going a little bit vigilante on this, because I think, again, this is very what's the term?
Inflammatory.
Agreed upon. Inflammatory. Yeah, people are really disgusted by this. And so people have been going a little bit vigilante on this. But what are some other things outside of that you would that I think are important for people to know about flock cameras?
Yeah, I mean, the architecture of the data that's collected. So I think that's the most important thing, because, like you alluded to in the beginning, you're really putting a lot of trust in this corporate entity, in this company, to lock down their data. But they literally say, we are going to share it with every law enforcement entity that we have. We build this national database. So no matter if you live in a town or you live in a certain state, you're driving through, your data is being logged, and can be searched across national databases. It's a serious issue. It's a serious violation of privacy, I think. And like I said, if it isn't a Fourth Amendment violation, it allows the state to creep right up to the line. I mean, there was a Supreme Court decision in 2018 that said, if the police have this long location history, they should have a warrant, generally, because it provides enough information about them to, constitute a search, about a person to constitute a search. I think that's right. I think that's appropriate. And obviously, having the idea that the state needs to have there needs to be strict scrutiny against state action if you're trying to do something that may infringe on constitutional rights. You have to show that you have the most narrow, least restrictive means to achieve a compelling state interest. I think that's a super important thing that has to be kept in mind here. But I mean, it's this idea that while the state says that the towns can't hold the data for more than 21 days, once it's shared, you can't really say that, right? You can't really guarantee that. So it allows, and I mean, one of the weirder parts is the fact that these police departments are doing it without a public vote. They're not even doing it without a budget vote. Like in Auburn, it came through a federal grant that they got in 2023, and they didn't install the cameras until last summer, but it just came through the police department in Auburn was able to just file this federal grant, get money, install them, and just have them for a year. And then everybody finds out about it earlier this year when they submit the budget request to renew it, because they didn't get the grant again. And they're like, wait, what the heck is going on with all this? So, that's an issue of just governance. And I think it's ironic when folks say that local control is going to solve this problem, when that's literally the process that failed here. People had zero knowledge that this happened. We only figured out about it after the fact. And then obviously the Auburn City Council got a lot of flack for this, just like South Portland, and they decided to not fund it, flock again. Though I think some of the councilors and the mayor would like to have it. So that's why it's important to ban these things on the municipal level. So yeah, you mentioned what else can you do? Yeah.
I just want to highlight. So the Lewiston, the Auburn City Council, who this is Auburn, not Lewiston. Okay, I was going to make a comment.
Yeah.
Lewiston City Council doesn't seem to care about policing crime, so it would be interesting to see them be so in favor of a tool to help with that. But anyway, no. But this was Auburn, not Lewiston.
Yeah, there's a lot of cameras in Lewiston too.
There are a lot in
Auburn. They're supposed to take them down this month because they defunded them. But
Yeah. It's just like I said, it's pretty rich to be like, we're going to use this tool to create more public safety, and yet there's this serious problem that they're dealing with, and I say dealing with, that they have, that they're not dealing with.
Is that really the tool that's going to help?
Right.
That's the thing that's going to do it.
The answer is no. Yeah. And what's interesting too is I interrupted you, but one of the interesting things too is that this is like one single private organization entity. Like one of the problems that we have in our society in general is that we have all given, to some degree or another, so much like over to these like major centralized corporations, right? So like I'm annoyed about this. There's a phone that I think I'm going to consider getting in the future that I think is going to be made by Motorola, if I'm right. It's not going to be associated with somehow, like it's not going to be associated with the Google or Microsoft or Apple. But right now, in order to be able to access the internet, you have to go through one of these, unless you're like one of those people who knows how to use Linux, which is a small percentage of the population. Some people are like, what is Linux? Yeah.
Right.
Do some research, and you probably won't do much more than that unless you're a software developer or really nerdy.
And you already know about computers.
Right. You would already know about Linux. But outside of that, we have to go through one of these three companies, and we have to trust that they're not tracking all of our information, which, I mean, Apple is the one that seems to be the most presenting themselves as the one that's doing the most to ensure you're not being tracked. But then again, because we don't look at the code that they've like locked, we don't know 100% whether or not they are. And I mean, my suspicion is that they are. But we live in this world where there are so many major organizations and corporations that are gathering our data on what we're doing on the internet, all these other places. I think we just like, we don't think about the impacts of those things, right? This is another example of an organization that is collecting our information in order, and again, but in this case, specifically giving it to the government. The centralization of power and authority and control is a big problem. It's one of the most oppressive things. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I would argue that this is even more egregious because at least with Meta and Google, whatever, you've clicked a box, you probably didn't read the terms of service, but you voluntarily opted into some program by offering your personal data, entered it in, clicked enter, yes, there's a lot of things that we don't know about the terms of service for the things that we blindly sign up for. But you really can't argue, you volunteered for that, that you opted into that.
Absolutely.
When your police department, or not even the town that you live in, a town that you travel through, a service center in the state that you live in, gets a grant that's private, that's hidden from the federal government, your tax dollars as well, implements them, and then starts collecting your personal data without your consent, that's a much more egregious use of this. You're absolutely right that you have to be conscious of what you give up to, corporate entities for sure, and what information you allow on the internet. But the fact that a state agency, a local agency, a law enforcement agency went and started collecting personal data on people without their consent, to me is really egregious. Violation of privacy, if not the Fourth Amendment, and a violation of just our sort of common decency of what you would expect. Another reason why I think the local control argument doesn't pass muster, and why the state has to pass the ban. I mean, Representative Boyer said he was going to file a full statewide ban next year, and I think the legislature has to pass that. Given the fact that there was such a backlash against the highway cameras, the additional highway license plate readers this year, a bipartisan coalition killed that. I think it was by 2/3. I would like to see another bipartisan coalition come together and file this ban. So none of these municipalities are using it. The state's not using it. The local governments can infringe on your rights just as much as the state and federal government. So it's important for the state, which, municipalities are organs of the state government. It's important for the state to protect the rights of the individual and the constitutional rights of the individuals. Local control, to me, is way farther down the line. than individual constitutional rights.
Well, and that's where you have the U.S. Constitution and then the state constitutions, both of them designed in ways in order to protect individual rights. State and municipalities have a degree of local power and control, which I do think is really appropriate as long as they stay in their lane. And as long as they're not violating constitutional rights, either state or federal, which is where I think some of I'm really in favor of people being able to do whatever the heck they want with their own property. I know that some people don't like that. Yeah. People are like, I don't like skyscrapers in Portland. It's like, do they own the property? If you're a conservative and you believe they have liberty to do what they want with their property, and all that you care about is the skyline, I'm sorry, that's not freedom.
Yeah.
That's
a good test.
That's the opposite. But anyway, there are people on the conservative side that it surprises me that they get really angry about these things. But I think people should be able to do what they want, and that a lot of times there is an argument that a lot of the municipalities with some of the codes that they put into place are actually violating our constitutional rights. I'm not the legal side on that, but that's a place where I think the state coming in and saying, no, you can regulate to a degree, as it relates to certain things, right? But there is a place where local municipalities go too far and violate our constitutional rights, whether they be state or federal constitution. And that's where the state and federal government, all the levels of government are meant to be checks against the other levels of government in order to, in the end, protect the individual from being oppressed by whatever level of government.
Exactly. Yeah. On that side note, I think the state deference to localities has gone way too far. All the attempts at property tax relief, the state just sends the towns money and then they don't stop spending. They keep spending more. It's just like, all right, at some point, you've got to rein in what the localities are doing. And this is a perfect example. There's no excuse to be collecting folks' data who don't even live in the town, who just travel through, they're well within their rights, conducting business and personal matters, not committing a crime. There's no excuse to be collecting private information, personal information that can create a pattern of life, for free individuals in a free society. That has to be the line. And the state is well equipped to defend against that. So yeah, I hope the legislature passes that ban, and whoever the governor is should sign it. I think all three of the candidates have said at one point or another that they don't like the flock thing, and maybe haven't said they'd sign the ban yet, but I'm hopeful that that should happen next year.
I imagine they will. I don't see a reason. Sometimes these things are charged, and there's like some one group who sees how they can use it against another. But I don't think we're going to see that in this type of a situation. I think this should go through, which is nice. It's nice to have a bipartisan, thing that we can all say that we agree on. It's like, okay, we found some common ground. Now maybe we can try to find some more. It is tough right now. One of the other issues that I think I alluded to, but I don't know if you've gone into yet, is one of the things that I've heard about the flock cameras is that they are easily hackable.
I don't know the details of that, but I mean, in today's day and age, I don't think you can really say that anything is not hackable. So
this is true, right?
It's over my head, but in the day of mythos and the day of cybersecurity, AI, conversation, I can't reasonably say that anything can't be hacked, and I don't know how the company itself could say that they can't be hacked. So I don't know if they have, but that's got to be an issue. And I mean, like I said, if they're uploading this to a national database, the state law on data retention for this stuff doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's a 3-week retention, because they've already shared it with Georgia and everywhere else, and and Flock has it. And so was the state law going to require Flock to delete their data? Like, no way.
Or at least to restrict access to that data, right? Anyway, but
the only way to do it is just like South Portland did. You got to get out of it. You got to cut the contract, cut the cameras, get them out. That's the only way to really protect against this. And another thing, so at Lead Maine, we host the Speak Up with Laura Libby podcast. And so on that podcast, we had 2 policy experts from the ACLU of Maine. That's on Laurel Libby's YouTube page. But they had a really, they've been tracking this stuff around the country. And obviously they're part of a national organization that's doing this stuff. You look at the don'tgetflocked.com, and if you're traveling through New York City or you're traveling through Houston, Texas, or Atlanta, Georgia, these things are everywhere. Even though Maine has a ban on facial recognition technology, for example, which is important, there's no statewide ALPR ban, but a lot of these states, you don't get to control whether your data is being held for how long or whatever. And so I think that's why it really calls into question the local control argument. Like, states have to take over. I'm not saying the federal government should be banning this stuff. I think I did see Thomas Massey say he was submitting a bill to restrict federal funds from any law enforcement agency that use it, which I think is appropriate federally.
Yeah.
But yeah, the state legislatures have to stand up. It's really egregious in some of these other cities around the country.
Yeah, well, what we know about data breaches in general is that there is basically no company who is immune to that, right? So, like, I think even these like big cybersecurity companies, I can't remember. I think I might have still been working for the bank when this happened, but it might have been after that, where one of these big cybersecurity companies, maybe a CloudStrike, right, got compromised essentially, which led to all these other places, because they're one of the biggest cybersecurity companies, and it might not have been them, but I believe it was. I believe it was them. They had some issues, right? So, like, even if we have really good cybersecurity, the truth is, like, somebody is going to be able to get. And so, like, if this information is out there, and it's something that could be hackable. And again, some of the rumors I'd heard was that it was easily hackable. And then if you get access to that whole database, or you can use it for nefarious purposes. I mean, this is not something that we want out there. And yes, like, let's hope that the legislature goes ahead and gets rid of this. And if you find out that your town is using it, go to your local school city council meeting, exactly. and speak up, because and if you don't feel like they're listening to you, send me a message, tell me when you spoke, and I'll go ahead and spread it louder on the internet.
Absolutely.
Send me the link, and I'll.
To your point of just what else can you do, you shouldn't be cutting down, you shouldn't be destroying private property, I can never condone property destruction. But you go to your local town meeting, you ask questions of the city council, you demand questions on the budget, you file FOIAs, you file Freedom of Access Act requests, and that just involves you emailing your town clerk or somebody, the contact at the local police department, all communications around automatic license plate readers or any funding, anything like that. You ask them for all of that stuff. They have to come back and they have to at least provide you a reasonable time estimate and cost estimate of how long they get you that information. But just doing that shows that people are paying attention. And I think just that pressure alone is going to help protect against some of these instances where they're going to go and do it on their own and without public approval or without public consent. But it is about speaking up. It is about getting on the local level. Look at your town charter. Can you file a petition? Can you file a citizen petition at your town level to add an ordinance, amend an ordinance, or amend the town or city charter to ban these things? The campaign in Auburn is a great example. I believe they're still collecting signatures. They're trying to get it on the ballot for this year. But every town has some measure of that, whether you have a city council or you have a town meeting or something like that. Check your local ordinances, but you may be able to run a local initiative where you need, a couple thousand signatures, something like that. But yeah, you have to speak up, and when the legislature comes back in session, make sure you submit testimony. But otherwise, it's just important to be known as someone who's paying attention on the local level. I think when local officials know they're being watched, they're a little more careful about what happens.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I think, that's just the reality. They don't like, again, who likes to be publicly called out, right? So in the city council members, they don't want to deal with stuff, especially if it's something that is so broadly agreed upon among the populace. So we bring it to light, and then the rest takes care of itself.
Take Auburn, for example. Auburn, they got a lot of flack for it back in March, and then the next time it even shows up in a hearing in the city council meeting, It's just the fact that it's removed from the budget, the next budget submission. So there isn't even another time that they bring it up to talk about it. They just bring up the next budget and it's just not there. And so it just minus $24,000 and they pass it. And so, I think there's a lot to be said. It all happened without anyone knowing. And then when folks found out, the city council fell in line. They knew what the right thing was to do. It's evidence.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think again, you can talk about local control. I think that there are some times where people just do not think through the implications of something. They think, oh, we want to help local law enforcement, and here's this free thing to be able to help us make sure that we can, arrest the bad guys, right? Like, unfortunately, right? We want to, and so I think there's but there's not a lot of forethought. Whereas there are some of us who are like hawks for excuse me, what was that? And
gotta have a healthy distrust of the state.
Right. I don't think you can distrust your government enough. I don't. That's
Agreed.
just the reality. So otherwise, we turn into V for Vendetta, which great movie. I don't want to live through it though. So let's not. But if you're wondering what it looks like to have a police state, watch V for Vendetta. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I had to put on Minority Report a couple weeks ago for my lady and I because she hadn't seen it. It was like, we should watch this.
Yeah. No, that's another great example of of how this essential idea of a police state can be corrupted and misused. And this is why we don't do it. This is why it's against the Constitution.
Yeah. We have 1984 for a reason. I don't think it's a logical fallacy, a slippery slope when you can see the mindset when you start to cede your personal agency and autonomy over to the state. And like I said, you don't become a free citizen that way. You become a subject that way, and it's just not the way America was set up. I think the cross-partisan appeal of the principal argument is so crucial. Let's keep making an argument for constitutional rights because we can bring over folks on the left, especially on the Fourth Amendment and I think the First Amendment as well. These are key. Fifth as well. I mean, this due process and freedom of speech and expression, I think, are really, really key pillars that we can organize around, cross-partisan, and we can engage folks. It's simple. It's easy. It's not like understanding power rates or, electricity generation and all this stuff. It's or healthcare. We innately understand the idea of privacy and I think fairness in due process and the principle of justice encoded in that, and the importance of free expression, the importance of having that be available to everybody. I mean, like your point as well, you can't give the state a tool to think it's going to help your side. An eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. You have to make sure that government is stable, it's predictable, and the laws are the same for everybody. That's what equal rights means. Justice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you again. Thank you for the work that you guys are doing over there at Lead Maine, and for coming on to talk a little bit more about flock cameras and give people a little bit of an education and an opportunity to figure out how they can help. Are there other things that are going on at Lead Maine that you think are worth talking about today?
Yeah, I mean, not in this topic, but we're running a MaineCare accountability project. So about a month ago, we submitted a few thousand signatures to make a couple rule changes to MaineCare to put more guardrails on providers so that folks are not billing the state without being checked in person, for instance. And so that if they're, suspected of improper billing, that the state is not going to chase the money after they've already and not keep paying folks after they've already after they've flagged these folks, so we're not sending money out the door while we're trying to get it back at the same time. But folks can go to leadmaine.com/MaineCare. Check that out. We're waiting for the department to announce the rulemaking process. There's a piece of state law where 150 signatures will require a department to initiate rulemaking on a particular subject. So we submitted a draft rule. We submitted over 3,000 signatures for 2 petitions, and they have to initiate rulemaking. So we're going to have a public comment period. We're going to have a public hearing on these issues, and it's going to allow folks to speak up and call for more accountability for tax dollars in MaineCare.
That sounds great. We definitely need that. I think there's a bit just a little bit of fraud going on there. And so some accountability would be nice.
Yeah, glad to come back and chat about that when we have the timeline and everything, and we know
Yeah.
when stuff's going down.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Well, thank you so
Awesome.
much, Nick. And also say thanks to Laurel for all the work that you guys do and everybody else on the team. And look forward to seeing where this goes. But I think the citizens will win on this one, and we'll get these flock cameras out of Maine, these style cameras, and protect our rights and our privacy. That's very important, paramount. We'll say it's one of the most important. The fact that it's in the Bill of Rights, right? The Constitution. It's foundational rights as American citizens. So very important. So yeah, thanks again. And thank you all for watching. We'll be back here on Thursday with Lewiston State Senate candidate, I believe, Rin Sol, talking about her